that just made me think of another question. Between guys like, Jerry Jarrett was a consultant, you had J.J. Dillon in, Terry Taylor, Mike Graham, Greg Gagne, Dusty, of course, Kevin Sullivan. Who would you say if, Tony Soprano had Silvio, right? Who would you consider like your right-hand man in WCW that you would, trust the most with an idea?
Oh, well, through process elimination, Mike Graham was there when I got there. He was a Dusty guy. Mike Graham he wasn't the most honorable person in the world. That's putting it mildly. And I don't like to speak ill of people who are no longer here to defend themselves, but Mike would have definitely not been on the list. Greg Gagne, unfortunately, Greg was a friend, and I brought him in, and I was instrumental in bringing him in. And that was partly out of, respect for our friendship, respect for what he did know. And Greg was a very talented guy. He just wasn't ever going to be in the role that he saw himself in. So Greg was kind of in a constant state of conflict. So it wouldn't have been Greg as a result of that. Kevin Sullivan, I trusted Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
If there was something I needed to confide in Kevin, whether it was an idea that I was forming or thinking about or wanted advice on, I was always pretty comfortable that I could go to Kevin and discuss it without worrying about it getting leaked. So Kevin was definitely on the list. Dusty Rhodes was a mentor in a way for me. I have too much respect for Dusty to even think about him as being a right-hand man, even in a description. If anything, I relied on Dusty a lot for his opinion because he was honest about his opinion. You may not agree with it. He may not agree with you, but he was so honest and direct with me in a positive way. So I would say Dusty was someone that I relied upon much more than being a right-hand man. I looked up to him a lot and still do to this day. That's about it, really, in terms of people that I had close enough relationships with to matter. Certainly would have been J.J. Dillon. He was I don't have any respect for J.J. Dillon at all. J.J. Dillon, I hired J.J. not because I really needed him, quite honestly. I hired him because I was thinking about hiring someone for talent relations. It was clearly a role that needed to be filled. Kevin Nash said that he had worked with JJ in WWF, and Kevin recommended JJ. I met with JJ. I found out from Kevin before I met with JJ that JJ's had certain challenges in his personal life, and he had a couple kids with special needs, and
Right.
Having gotten fired from WWF. I've always believed, and this has been a kind of a fatal flaw of mine. When people spend their lives in the professional wrestling business, and it comes to an end, for the most part, those people have nowhere to go. When you've been in the wrestling business all of your adult life, and you're into your 30s, your 40s, or in JJ's case, even his 50s, and you no longer have an income in the world of profession. Number one, you end up making a lot of money if you're lucky enough to be making six figures, and you have a life, and you have bills, and you have a home, and you have overhead, and all of a sudden that's gone. In the professional wrestling business, you can't just go down the road and get another job in the same business. You know what I mean? You're literally having to start over. And I was sensitive to that with JJ. And again, sensitive to his personal situation. So I not against my will, but against my better judgment, I guess, I hired him out of a sense of loyalty, even though I really didn't know him. I was loyal to someone who was in the business and who was basically in need. So I hired him under those terms, hoping that it would work out. And it started off okay, but shortly after I hired JJ, and he denies this to this day, which makes me disrespect him even more. If he would admit it, it would change the way I look at him, but clearly he hasn't changed because he lies about it to this day. But he literally, and I understand why he did it. I'm not blaming him for doing it necessarily, but he came to me at some point with a folder. And I remember exactly where he stopped me in the hallway in the CNN Center. And he stopped me. He goes, Eric, I've got something here you might be interested in. And I just looked at him quizzically because, I just hired him, really. He'd only been around for a week or two, and I couldn't imagine what that would be. And he acted very suspicious about it. It was like, doesn't want anybody to hear us, doesn't want anybody to see us talking about it, which is weird. And he opens up this folder, and it was the complete, all the payout records for what WWF was paying talent.
Wow.
While JJ was the head of talent relations. And number one, I didn't. We were already kind of dealing with a lot of litigation with regard to WWF because of the trademark issues. I certainly didn't want to expose the company or myself to any of that kind of surreptitious, information record keeping fraud. It just wasn't necessary. I wasn't interested in it. It wouldn't have had any impact on me or my plans going forward anyway. So he was trying to, share something with me that, number one, he shouldn't be sharing. He shouldn't have that information. And if he did, he should have returned it to the company. And he certainly shouldn't have been sharing it with me. And I've always, somebody told me once, I can't remember who it was, but, if someone steals a nickel, they'll steal $1. And if they'll steal $1, they'll steal $20. And if they'll take $20 from you, they'll take anything you own. There's no limit. And I've always kind of kept that thought in the back of my mind so that when somebody comes to me and offers, to do something that I know is wrong, that they think I might benefit from, I realize that they'll do the same thing to me at some point, given the opportunity, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is not somebody that I want to really do business with. I didn't have the heart to terminate him for the reasons I described earlier, but I made the decision right there that this guy will never get within 100 miles of anything sensitive, of anything important. If he can deal with, talent and help along the way without having to, have access to records or really discrete information, great. If he can't, then I'll end up making a decision down the road. But at that point, I no longer trusted him or his judgment. And that, that's why, J.J. Dillon was like kind of a potted plant around WCW when I was there. He had a role, but he didn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just kept around out of, a sense of loyalty to people in the business in general.